Welcome. This is Dr. Sam Fiala, and this is just a brief little video to share with you some ideas for talking to parents about giving the BDI2. Things to talk about before you go out to kind of get them ready, some tips for dealing with possible problems you may run into when giving the test, and then a little bit about talking to parents afterward in terms of giving feedback. So before you go, obviously you want to talk with them about the purpose of giving the test, and it's to determine eligibility for the program. Right. So basically, this is a test to assess how the child's developing in a variety of areas in terms of how they communicate, how they can get around, motor development, how they interact with other people, what kind of problem-solving skills they've developed so far, because we expect kids to develop certain skills at certain points in time. And you can go through the whole spiel about ECI, about how we help get kids on track and how we do that. But this test helps us figure out where kids are on those tracks of development. And so you're going to say that the BDI2 is a standardized test, right? So what does it mean to be a standardized test? Well, two things. One, there's a set of rules for giving the test, right? There's a standardized way to give it. And what that means to the parent is, when I come out, I'm going to have to ask certain questions and do certain things in a particular way. And it's the same way I'll do it for every single child. And then one reason for that is to make sure that it's fair for all kids. So anybody coming in with a preconceived notion that maybe this child, I don't think they qualify, or I do think they qualify, doesn't matter. Every kid's going to get the same test, and they're going to get a fair shake because it's a standardized test. But because of that, some of the things I do, some of the questions I ask may sound a little funny, and I may use some weird words, but they're because it's the same words I have to use for everybody that's used with people in all parts of the country. So some things may sound a little odd, but we can talk about that as we go through. Okay. The other component of being a standardized test is that there's a standardization group, right, that you can compare any given child to. So a whole lot of kids were given this test before in kind of controlled conditions to make sure they did the test the right way, and they got scores and saw where kids were on these different skills, right? And kids with delays, kids without delays, kids that were advanced, all kinds of kids, to try to figure out what the typical response is to this test and what kind of responses are atypical, where, okay, kids this age typically don't do this skill yet, so wow, they're really ahead. Or most kids age do the skill and very few don't, so maybe they're behind. But we can get an idea of where your child is compared to other kids because they've given this test to other kids already. So your kid is being compared to all those other children. And that's helpful because, again, it gets away from just kind of any kind of guesswork or any person's personal theories about where a child should be. It's compared to how most kids seem to be doing. Okay. In terms of you talk with the parent a little bit about what it's going to look like, so what the child will be asked to do. So one of us will be interacting with the child, and the other one will be mostly talking with you. And they'll be playing with the child, doing some things that are very much like games, some like puzzles, some things that are kind of silly, some that are a little bit like school in terms of maybe some coloring or drawing certain shapes. The child will be asked to follow certain directions. Hand me this, give me that, put that there. And then there'll also be some things that we'll want to see the child do, just that they typically do in terms of like how they eat with a spoon, or how they drink out of a bottle or a cup. We may ask to see some of those things. But nothing too taxing on the child, and we'll of course be very respectful of the child's needs and your needs. So it'll be some play stuff and some just kind of daily tasks. Right? Also, we're going to touch on that some of the things that we're going to ask the child to do, we don't expect them to do. And you can explain to the parent, when we go through in this test, we're going to give items that start off kind of where they should be doing some things, and then we're going to keep going to higher level skills until we eventually reach some things that we really don't expect them to do at all. This test goes up to 7 years of age, and we don't expect a 2-year-old to do things a 7-year-old can do. but we want to keep going until we can find out the upper limit of what they can do. So we don't just want to identify where they might be delayed. We also want to look at what kind of strengths they have. And to figure out the strengths, we're going to have to give them some really kind of hard stuff that most kids their age may not be able to do. So I don't want you to feel, frustrated or worried if there are certain things that they seem to be failing at, because they're not expected to do all the things we ask them to do. And then talk to the parent what they'll be expected to do. 'Cause some parents will think, okay, well, they're going to come and do stuff with the kid, and I'll go do laundry, I'll go do whatever. We want to kind of prepare them that they're going to have a pretty large role in this as well. A lot of interview, right? So we're going to be asking you a lot of questions about your child, and they kind of fall in two categories. Some things will be what things a child can do. So are they doing this yet? Have they ever done this thing? Other things will be asking more about what the child typically does. Okay, so they can do this, but do they do it just some of the time? Do they do it most of the time? So is it typical of them to be able to eat with a spoon, or can every once in a while they'll get lucky and get a spoonful of food in their mouth? So I'll be asking you lots of things about that, and asking you to make that distinction between some things that they can do some of the time and things that they can do typically, 90% or more, for example. And then we're also going to ask the parent to help, but not help too much, right? So I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, and it'll be really helpful for me, for you to help the child be comfortable, because it's kind of a strange situation, and most kids find it enjoyable, but some kids do experience a little bit of anxiety when a new person comes in the home and asks them to do all these funny things. So if you can help me make them comfortable, that'll help things go really smoothly. But whenever they're trying to do a skill, so if they're trying to build the tower with blocks, I really need to be able to see what they can do without help. And I know as a parent, it's really tempting to jump in and just kind of straighten up the tower a little bit at the base, and maybe guide their hand a little bit, and that's good, and that's good teaching, and that's helping to build skills. But in this moment, this day that we're not really there to build skills so much as we are to just kind of assess where they're at. But if after we finish, getting what we need, if you want to say, okay, now I wonder, can they do it with a little bit of help? I'll be glad to stick around, and we can look at that and see what they can do with a little more help. But for the test, we have to see what they can do on their own. Okay. Other things to talk about before you go? Getting the house ready. A couple things. One, talking to the parent about limiting distractions. So one of these is obviously other children, which sometimes having other children there can be helpful to a child because it makes them more comfortable. But sometimes if another child is very active, they can be very distracting. So talk with the parent. Okay, so there are other kids in the home. Will they be there when we're testing? Do you think that they'll be able to contain themselves while we're doing what we need to do? Or are they the type of kid that is going to jump in the middle of it and not let their little sister or little brother do the things they need to do, and then kind of problem solve with the parent? Okay, well, how can we deal with that? Is there somewhere they can go for a little while, or can you put on a movie in their room, or whatever? Kind of work that out with the parent. Also, just in terms of having some things ready, we talk about how I'm going to bring a big bag of toys and these little puzzles and stuff. But also, some kids seem to enjoy doing the things with the new stuff. Some kids like their own stuff better. So if you could have just a couple of toys that what they enjoy, they kind of know what they are, and maybe a book or two that they like. We can use those as part of our test materials instead of the books and toys that I brought. We can use some of your stuff too, because it just makes kids feel a little more comfortable sometimes. Okay, in terms of scheduling. Obviously, you want to go at a time whenever the child has a good energy level, not right before nap. Not when they're going to be too tired or cranky or fussy. So, what's a good time of day for your child? Because we want to get a good picture of what they can do, and sometimes it's hard to see that if we come at a time when a kid just isn't interested in interacting with anybody and is ready to go down for a nap. The other thing is, as I told you before, I'll be looking at some daily activity stuff, and a lot of times it's helpful to see the things that a child can do and typically does do while eating. So if we maybe during the 2-hour block that we're trying to schedule, if that could encompass their snack time for them, that would be really helpful, because we can do some of the test while they're eating their snack. Okay, a couple of difficulties that you might look out for. Having the television on, obviously, and I'm sure you all have developed by now clever ways of dealing with that. But if anybody hasn't, you can always just say, "Wow, that's a really interesting show. I really like that one." But I'm such a scatterbrain. I have a really hard time focusing on more than one thing at once. So for me, would you mind turning that off? Because I just because I'm trying to see what the child's doing, and I like this show so much, I can't take my eyes off it. I'm going to miss something, and I'm going to miss something your child does, and not give them enough points, and get a bad idea. It's going to hurt the picture I have of them. Oh, thanks, that'd be so helpful, right? Or whatever, but some way, get them to turn off the TV, turn down the radio, whatever it is. Again, if siblings are there, which is again, potentially helpful, potentially not. If they're wanting to jump in and be part of it, find something for them to do. So make them your little helper, and you can also set up things for them to do. Get the stacking cups and tell them, okay, I want to see how fast you can stack them, and then unstack them, and then restack them, and then build a tower with them. Ready to go. So give them little tasks that aren't necessarily things that have anything to do with the BDI, but will keep them busy and usually involve some of the manipulatives that you don't need for the child you're working with at the moment. Dealing with non-compliant parents. Sometimes parents aren't interested in being part of this. They maybe are on their phone or their iPad or whatever. They're just busy, and so early on, you want to kind of communicate that I know how important it is to you to have the best for your child, and that you want them to be successful, and that you're interested in this process and interested in ECI services because you think that this might be something that's helpful to your child achieve to the fullest of their potential. But for this whole process to get started on the right foot, really need for us to work as a team to get a good idea of what your child can do. And so you are the expert on this child. I may be an expert in my field, in mental health, in speech, in motor functioning, in child development, whatever it is, but nobody knows this child better than you. So I really can't, there's no way I can get an accurate picture of what Johnny, what Lisa, whatever the child's name is, what they can do without you being a major part of this. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing and you're going to do to help me get a better idea of what your child is doing. Okay. So again, try to make them part of the team and emphasize their importance as expert on their child. The non-compliant child. And child may be non-compliant for a couple of reasons, but one thing to do if they're refusing to do some of the structured items, and they can do it, but they're just not interested. And it's like, oh, I'm gonna get a crappy picture of this kid. The person who's doing the recording, move to some interview stuff, right? So even if you have to go a little bit out of order, focus on interview. That way you're not just kind of wasting time, because time is precious in these things. Start interviewing the parent on stuff, and the other person, just play with the kid, right? So build rapport, and as you're building rapport, you can kind of work in sometimes structured items. And if you can kind of get the kid back on board that way, then you can switch back to focusing on those structured items, which you want to make sure and get before, again, the child gets too fussy or cranky and just ready for a nap or whatever else. Obviously, the other thing is to, try to figure out why they're fussy. Do they need a snack? Do they need a diaper change? Are they just really uncomfortable with strangers, which you want to kind of note that to yourself, but then say, okay, well, maybe we're going to need to move the parent into being more involved in some of the structured stuff than we typically have them sitting on the floor with the child, if that makes the child more comfortable, or having the child in their lap, whatever we need to do to get this child to give us a better picture of what they can do. In terms of giving feedback, stuff that you already know. Obviously, you don't want to talk about, okay, your child is normal, your child's not normal, because normal is a artificial construct. There's no such thing as normal other than a normal curve, right? So we're talking about typical. So typically developing delayed development. And so, we're going to be doing age equivalent stuff, right? So on fine motor, your child who's 24 months old scored at a 19-month-old range. Does that mean that your 24-month-old is a 19-month-old? No, it means that the things that your 24-month-old did today on this test are similar to what most 19-month-old, the average, the typical 19-month-old has done on this test, right? And that may be accurate in terms of their fine motor development, the things they're able to do are similar to a 19-month-old, or it may be that they just didn't want to do some things today, and you kind of have to, use your own intuition and your own observation and your experience and talking with the parent about whether or not you think that number is a good reflection of the child's abilities or not. And if you think it is, and say, okay, yeah, then we think the child really does have a delay, and they're not doing some of the things that a lot of kids their age are. There's some kids their age that they're doing more than. Right? That will always be the case, right? But there's enough kids their age that are doing more stuff that they're a little behind with some of these skills. And you can talk about how ECI can help that. But again, we never want to use the terms normal and abnormal. And then last, we'll talk about these age equivalents, and for the subtests, they make sense, and you can interpret them and talk about what they mean, right? That, okay, they're doing things that most kids at this age are doing or would do on this test. Right? We're also going to be calculating age equivalents for the domain scores, right? For at least some of the domains. These are often not interpretable, right? So if on the personal social domain, so on the subtests, on one of them, the child scores at 19 months, and another one they score at 26 months. And if you, to get the domain, the large domain score, you just average those. So what is it, 19 and 26? Let's sort of an easier one. Let's say 18 and 26, even numbers. So what's that, 22 months average? Yeah. So that child isn't doing things in terms of adult interaction and peer interaction like most 22-month-olds, right? Because in some ways they're like a 26-month, in some ways like an 18-month-old. And it doesn't make sense to say that, well, so on average it's like a 22-month-old. That makes no sense. So you want to tell parents that we've got to create these numbers for scoring purposes, but it doesn't mean that overall they're like this. Let's focus instead on these subtest scores. So with this particular set of skills, this way of functioning, they're above average, on target, whatever. And on this set, they're a little behind. But combining those numbers just doesn't make sense. So don't try to interpret those for the parent. If they ask about them, you can say, okay, well, it's an average of these things, but the average isn't necessarily meaningful. If they're 24 months, 23 months, and 23 months on 3 subtests of a domain, then yeah, the average is meaningful because they're all pretty much the same. So overall, they are like a 23 and a half, 24-month-old child for personal social or whatever you're looking at. But if there's scatter, if those subtests diverge, then it's not interpretable. Okay. All right, that's all for now. If you have any questions, please let me know.